Hello friends, welcome back to the next session on Service Operations Management. Now let's begin with our learning. In this particular session, we'll be understanding and dealing with the concepts of planning, survey, analysis, the learning objectives. At the end of this particular session, the learners will be able to understand what do we mean by planning the survey analysis, what are the various importance of planning the survey analysis, and what are the various activities that are being taken in the concept of planning the surveys analysis. Now let's understand, or we begin with our learning with respect to understanding what do we mean by planning the survey analysis. Planning the survey analysis is a concept wherein whatever information, whatever data that we are collecting from the various sources, may it be a primary source or maybe it a secondary source, we need to plan a particular activity. Now, this particular planning is essentially required in order to identify that whatever plan or whatever activity that we are going to undertake or continue, it should be always a perfect one. The activity that we are going to undertake in a near future should always have a plan of action, which is always a set designed of series of activities, wherein we need to identify what series of activities, what steps we are going to undertake, and on what basis the action plan will be completed. The survey analysis is a considerable step wherein we need to collect the data from different people, from different sources, from different participants, and on those particular basis, we need to come to a certain or draw certain conclusions. And hence, collection of data is essentially important. And when we try to collect the data always has a certain characterization, calibration, verification, validation, and assessment. There are various models which helps the business organizations to collect those particular data. And when such models are being applied and it is not being used in an effective way, it may hamper the image of the organization, and accordingly, evaluation of data will be very difficult for a certain constitution. And hence, planning the survey analysis is essentially important to identify how do we collect a particular data and how it can be made applicable in the business organization in the short run or in the long run. Now let us understand what are the various steps for planning the survey analysis. The first step in planning the survey analysis is the survey design. So we need to design a particular survey, and in which we need to define what is the score or what is the objectives of conducting this particular activity. So quality assurance has to be, every standards needs to be measured, and the planning survey analysis conducts a particular first scenario of how do we design a particular survey. If the survey has been designed very effectively, then only on those particular basis, the future activities will be undertaken in a very better way. While designing the survey, we need to understand and take into account what are our objectives of this particular study and how do we identify or continue with the scope of the study that has been undertaken. When the first step has been completed, we move towards the second step, which is planning and preparation. So in case of planning and preparation, we need to have a proper plan or a set of coordinated and series of activities. That is, which step or which activity will be undertaken and how do you go ahead with the plan. So accordingly, planning and preparation of the collection of data, the information of collection of information, analysis of information, output generation and interpretations, all the activities needs to be planned, and hence planning and preparation forms the second step. The third step in planning the survey analysis is pre-testing and piloting. So before a particular survey is being undertaken, we always conduct a pilot survey, and accordingly, on the basis of a pilot survey, a pre-testing is undertaken as to test the validity of the results. So whatever data that we are going to collect in actual scenario, whether that particular data will be acceptable or rejectable, whether people will respond to the questionnaires or not, all those consideration needs to be answered, and on those particular basis, pre-testing and piloting is necessary important. The pilot study is always been undertaken, whether it is a primary based data or a secondary based data, whether it is a research, whether it is an hypothesis, and so on. So any type of research activity or a data collection activity is being undertaken, pilot study is usually undertaken, and it is highly recommended to conduct a pilot study. The fourth step in planning the survey analysis is final survey design and planning and prepare. So here in this case, when the pilot study gives you a sufficient and positive results, then we move ahead with preparing of actual survey plan and we design a particular survey. When the final survey is being designed, we start preparing and again planning about how the data can be collected, what are the various steps or measures that can be undertaken for collecting those particular data, and how the step-by-step activity will be implemented for collection of data in the market scenario. The fifth perspective is field work and data collection. So when we actually approach to the market, to the consumers, to the people, or to the public at large, then we try to collect the data from the different sources, and accordingly, on those particular basis, we collect the data from the field, that is from the market constitution, and our data collection activity begins or it commences. Then the sixth perspective is data file construction, analysis, and reporting. So on the basis of field analysis that we have undertaken, the data that has been collected from the various fields, we prepare a proper analysis, we prepare or jot down what data that we have collected, and accordingly, we start analyzing the data. So on the basis of analysis, the various reports have been prepared, and accordingly, the various visualizations are also been prepared. So in order to see, or in order to say or portray our data in a very effective way, we need to identify how the data can be presented and in what way the data can be helpful for the better understanding. And hence, analysis and interpretation is essentially important. And on those particular basis, we need to report a certain conclusion. The conclusion as to what were the objectives, whether those particular objectives was been met or it was not been fulfilled, what were the hypotheses that we have designed or what that we have decided, and whether those particular hypotheses are either accepted or whether they are rejected. Now, if all these particular activities, that is step number 1 to 6, does not fulfill, or if it is not been conducted successfully, then again we need to move towards the next activity, that is planning for a new round of survey. So if the current survey or the results that you are finding out are not very effective, if they are not been very fruitful, then again you need to move to step number 2, 1, that is for planning of a new survey or a round, and accordingly you again need to redesign a particular survey and define the scope and objectives of the survey analysis in again fashion mode. Now all these particular activities, that is right from step number 1 to step number 6 or 7, always there is an effective essence of quality assurance which has been essentially required. So quality needs to be present in a business organization, and at every stage the assurance of quality needs to be identified and it needs to be available in the business organizations. Now let us understand what are the benefits from planning a survey and planning an analysis. So number 1 is evaluating, number 2 is cleaning, and number 3 is summarizing. So these are the various benefits, that is we can evaluate what results or what plans we have conducted, whatever result that we have collected, whatever data that we have collected, whether it is helpful or fruitful to the organization or not. Cleaning, as to whatever data that we have collected, may be structured, unstructured, positive, negative, favorable, unfavorable, all type of data can be available with you. So cleaning the data is essentially important. On the basis of survey analysis, we have a certain consideration as to availability of clean data, which is always qualitative in nature. And lastly, summarization. So summarization as to coming to a certain conclusion of the graphical representation and visualization about how the data can be available and beneficial to the organization for a specific consideration or the problem solution. Now let us understand how to analyze the survey results. So analyzing the survey results can be undertaken on the basis of 4 measurement levels. Now those particular 4 measurement level are nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. So these are the 4 measurement levels on the which basis you can understand and analyze what results that is being generated on the basis of survey. The next step is selecting your survey questions. So survey questions may be either open-ended questions, closed-ended questions, or direct questions, indirect questions, and so on, or a WH question. So in this way, we need to select which type of questions we need to ask and how the information can be collected from the various respondents. Analyzing the quantitative data first. So making an analysis and interpretation of quantitative data is very simple, and hence it is always recommended or highly recommended that we must first analyze the quantitative data and then we must move towards the qualitative data for its analysis. Using the cross tabulation to better understand your target audience. So we must always apply and use the various tools and technique as to the cross tabulation, and accordingly the target audience needs to be selected and the results must be communicated to the individuals. The next perspective is understanding the statistical significance of the data. So what is the benefit and statistical significance of the data that we have collected, how it can be helpful to the business organizations in the short run as well as in the long run is essentially important to identify, and on those particular basis, the statistical significance can be implemented. And lastly, considering the causation versus correlation. So what is the causation and correlation between the data that we have collected, whether there is a certain differences between the data that we have expected and that we have actually collected is of a certain constitution and it has certain deviations. So considering the causation and correlation is essentially important to analyze. Now let us understand what are the various 4 steps of a survey. Number 1, the first step of conducting or collecting a data through a survey is creating the questions. So first we need to create the questions, and then we need to move toward the second step, that is asking the questions. So once the questions have been created, we must approach to the respondents, and accordingly asking the questions is the second step. The third step is tallying the results. So on the basis of asking the questions, we need to prepare a tally mark about what responses or respondents have been given as a part of a responses, and what are the various results as a part of an tally. And lastly, the step number 4 is to presenting the results. So accordingly, on the basis of various visualization, bar diagram, pie charts, histograms, and so on, we can present the results on the various platforms. Now let us understand how to write a summary of survey results. So we can write the various survey or summary of a survey results on the basis of number 1, that is using the various visualizations to show the data, writing the key facts first. So just a bullet points or a certain information can be provided on the basis of key facts, writing a short survey summary. So a short survey summary of either a small paragraph, which may be either of 2 to 3 sentences, explaining the motivation for your survey. So what is the motivation for your survey? We can explain in terms of those particular considerations. Putting the survey statistics in the context as to analysis of certain data and inserting certain amount of statistic, that is figures and numbers in those particular data. And next step is telling the readers about what the outcome should be. So accordingly, a pre-guess can be provided about what the results can be and how the results can be beneficial for the organization and for the users. And lastly, export your survey results graph. So accordingly, we can prepare the various survey graphs, and accordingly, the results can be exported. Now let's understand what the various best survey tools. The best survey tools that can be used for data analysis are SurveyMonkey, the Typeform, the personalized customer surveys tools, the JotForm, the Ask Nicely, the FormStack, and the Google Forms. So these are the various best survey tools which have been largely used, and it has been referred by the various individuals or the researchers. Now let's understand which are the 7 most commonly used data analysis methods and techniques. Number 1, the first one is the regression analysis. Number 2 is the Monte Carlo simulation. Number 3 is the factor analysis. Number 4 is the cohort analysis. Number 5 is the cluster analysis. Number 6 is the time series analysis. And number 7 is the sentiment analysis. So on these particular basis, the various any methods or mode of data analysis can be selected. On any one basis, the data analysis can be undertaken. So now let's summarize or understand, conclude what we have understood in this particular chapter. In this particular session or the module, we have understood how do we analyze or how do we create a certain data, and what are the various tools and techniques on which basis the data analysis can be undertaken. The data that we are collecting is always of a qualitative nature, and more data is more qualitative. The results will be also more qualitative and beneficial or fruitful to the organization. Before beginning with the data collection, it is very necessary to understand what data we are collecting, how it will be presented to the business organizations in the short run as well as in the long run, and how it will be helpful for the business considerations. The data that we are collecting should be always, whether it is a planned, it is an unplanned, and what type of data it is made applicable. Before we start a particular survey, a pre-hand or a rough information should be undertaken, and only on those particular basis, the analysis of data should be undertaken. And we must always try to avoid various erroneous results or the errors that can be created. And accordingly, a specific and justifiable data information should be delivered to the management and to the people. Now let's summarize what we have learned in this particular session. In this particular session, we have understood what do we mean by the importance of data, what are the various benefits of data records and data maintenance, and what are the various insights of data analysis and how data analysis can be undertaken in the business organization in the short run as well as in the long run. I hope you must have enjoyed the learning in this particular session. We'll stay connected and we'll continue with our learning. Thank you for your patience listening. Thank you.